Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piss. Ukraine war, breaking news update. Actually synthesizing a couple of news pieces over the last week or so, but there are these scare quotes leaks. We're going to talk about whether these are leaks or not because there's some confusion here. That Musk is set to get access to top secret US plans for a potential war with China in a meeting in the Pentagon. This has come from the New York Times. I'm going to read some of the New York Times article, read the denial from Musk and even Trump and Hegseth, and then look at what has happened over the last week with regard to Russia offering Musk, I guess, some kind of deal. They want to speak to him at least about working with Roscosmos and Rosatom in Russia. Anyway, I guess the foundation to this video is that Elon Musk, when the war against Ukraine started, when Russia invaded, was pro-Ukraine. Because, as I've argued before, that was a moral intuition. He intuitively, as we all did, went, that's really unfair, go for it, Ukraine, we're with you. And he stood, I would say resolutely, it wasn't resolute at all. He stood for that time with Ukraine. And then I speculate, as many have, that he came to realize he depended very much on Russian natural resources. There was steel and aluminium, Oligarchic, before he was Rusal, before he was sanctioned. A lot of natural resources either came from Russia and were then sanctioned, or possibly still do come from Russia, I don't know. And also China. He operates in China without any evident strings attached as the only business that's able to do so. Tesla can operate in China. However, I would argue that there are strings attached because actually he has to toe the party line, quite literally with regard to the CCP maybe in China. So you will note that since the beginning of the Ukraine war, and since he switched sides, Elon Musk has not once criticized Putin and Russia or China. That is a massive, massive thing because he has openly criticized freedom of speech in Europe and championed AfD over freedom issues, and yet will not say anything about Russia and China, where freedom of speech is far, 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 far worse as an issue. Why is that? And then we hear this. So Musk is set to gain access to top secret US plans for potential war with China. New York Times writes, the Pentagon is scheduled on Friday to brief Elon Musk on the US military's plan for any war that might break out with China, two US officials said on Thursday. Another official said the briefing will be China-focused without providing additional details. A fourth official confirmed Mr. Musk was to be at the Pentagon on Friday but offered no details. Providing Mr. Musk access to some of the nation's most closely guarded military secrets would be a dramatic expansion of his already extensive role as an advisor to President Trump and leader of his effort to slash spending and purge a government of people and policies they oppose. It would also bring into sharp relief the questions about Mr. Musk's conflicts of interest as he ranges widely across the federal bureaucracy while continuing to run businesses that are major government contractors. In this case, Mr. Musk, the billionaire chief executive of both SpaceX and Tesla, is a leading supplier to the Pentagon and has extensive financial interests in China. Pentagon war plans, known in military jargon as O-plans or operational plans, are among the military's most closely guarded secrets. If a foreign country was to learn how the US planned to fight a war against them, it could reinforce its defenses and address its weaknesses, making the plan far less likely to succeed, etc., etc. And it goes into talking about the plan, about who would have access and where Musk fits in. And we're going to join the article later where it says, yet Mr. Musk's extensive business interests make his access to strategic secrets about China a serious problem in the view of ethics experts. Officials have said revisions to the war plans against China have focused on upgrading the plans for defending against space warfare. China has developed a suite of weapons that can attack US satellites. Mr. Musk's constellations of low Earth orbit Starlink satellites, which provide data and communications services from space, are considered more resilient than traditional satellites, but he could have an interest in learning about whether or not the US could defend his satellites in a war with China. Participating in a classified briefing on the China threat with some of the most senior Pentagon and US military officials would be a tremendously valuable opportunity for any defense contractor seeking to sell services to the military. Okay, pause. On the one hand, you can read this as a massive grift, where he gets to have access to all of these plans and all of this knowledge within the Pentagon. And that gives him the ability to influence decisions in the Pentagon as to whether or not you go to war with China, given that he could lose massively in the process. That is what is underwriting his criticisms of Ukraine and the lack of criticism against Russia, is that he wants the war to end. He's trying to influence, I think, a large reason why the US has changed sides and is trying to bring the war to a hasty end that does not benefit Ukraine, is that Elon Musk, as much as anyone, wants the war to be over so he can continue doing trade with Russia and with Rusal and others so that he can benefit. You could also argue that he's looking after his interests in terms of satellites provision, satellite comms provision for the world, for the US. And actually, it's worth him being, if you're being charitable to to Musk and to Trump, it's worth Musk being there because actually he has a knowledge of his own low Earth orbit satellites, and that could have some strategic impact on decisions being made at that kind of level. But then the flip side, as this article goes to talk about, is that this gives him a huge advantage as a CEO of a private company, or a CEO of a company, a huge advantage over other providers, over other corporations and companies that would also like to be able to gain access to that knowledge and be in that situation. So they could, make hay while the sun shines. So the article continues, participating in a classified briefing on the China threat with some of the most senior Pentagon and US military officials would be a tremendously valuable opportunity for any defense contractor seeking to sell services to the military. Mr. Musk could gain insight into new tools that the Pentagon might need, and that SpaceX, where he remains the chief executive, could sell. Contractors working on relevant Pentagon projects generally do have access to certain limited war planning documents, but only once war plans are approved, said Todd Harrison, a senior fellow of the American Enterprise Institute, where he focuses on defense strategy. Individual executives rarely, if ever, get exclusive access to top Pentagon officials for a briefing like this, Mr. Harrison said. Quote, Musk at a war planning briefing? He said, giving the CEO of one defense company unique access seems like this could be grounds for a contract protest and is a real conflict of interest. Mr. Musk's SpaceX is already being paid billions of dollars by the Pentagon and federal spy agencies to help the US build new military satellite networks to try to confront rising military threats from China. SpaceX launches most of these military satellites for the Pentagon on its Falcon 9 rockets, which take off from launch pad SpaceX has set up at military bases in Florida and California. The company separately has been paid hundreds of millions of dollars by the Pentagon that now relies heavily on SpaceX's Starlink satellite communications network for military personnel to transmit data worldwide. In 2024, SpaceX was granted about $1.6 billion in Air Force contracts. That does not include classified spending with SpaceX by the National Reconnaissance Office, which has hired the company to build it a new constellation of low Earth orbit satellites to spy on China, Russia, and other threats. It's a massive competitive advantage that he gets. And he also potentially is able to influence the foreign policy and military strategy of the United States. Now, Elon Musk has responded to this report very robustly. It does look like they're circling around the wagons here. And I get a sense that the lady doth protest too much. Elon Musk has issued a stark warning to Pentagon officials following reports he was scheduled to receive a briefing Friday about the US military's top secret war plans for China. Hours before, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed Musk's visit for Friday, so he seems to be confirmed to be meeting there at least. The New York Times reported that military officials would show the tech billionaire slideshow of how the US would engage in a conflict with China. Musk claimed that the information was, quote, false, and derided the newspaper for allegedly disseminating, quote, propaganda before issuing a thinly veiled threat to Pentagon officials. Quote, the New York Times is pure propaganda. Also, I look forward to the prosecutions of those at the Pentagon who are leaking maliciously false information to the New York Times. I mean, it's not really a leak if it's false, it's just lying. So I wonder whether the use of the word leak might actually give you an indication that it possibly is true, that he's used the word leak. Otherwise, you'd just be they're lying. So I don't know. He tweeted early on Friday morning, sharing a Truth Social post from President Donald Trump denying the claims. They will be found, Musk added. A US official told the Times the senior military officials would attend the briefing for Musk at the Pentagon, etc., etc., and that goes into the details from New York Times article and also Wall Street Journal, reporting that Musk had been scheduled to be briefed on the war planning for China, so on and so forth. So, yeah, late on Thursday, so that's just last night, Trump denounced reports that Musk would be granted any access to closely guarded operational blueprints as completely untrue, and that China would not be discussed. Quote, the fake news is added again, this time the failing New York Times. They said incorrectly that Elon Musk is going to the Pentagon tomorrow to be briefed on any potential war with China, he posted on Truth Social. How ridiculous. China will not even be mentioned or discussed. How disgraceful it is that the discredited media can make up such lies. Anyway, the story is completely untrue. Hegseth also contested the report, tweeting that the meeting is about innovation, efficiencies and smarter production. He also lambasted the so-called fake news, adding, this is not a meeting about top-secret China war plans. But of course, when you got 4 people saying it is, although they are unnamed, so, it's pinch of salt and all that, but 4 people saying, yeah, it's about China, and a couple of them saying they're going to be discussing those secret plans with Musk, then it does look like they're circling the wagons there. Now, this needs to be taken in the context of Kirill Dmitriev, who's in charge of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund and international economic cooperation, has come out and said this week that he is looking forward to a meeting with Elon Musk. He expects to hold talks with Musk soon about flying to Mars. Dmitriev said Russia wanted to work with SpaceX CEO Musk as part of Moscow's effort to strengthen and develop Russia's space agency Roscosmos and state nuclear corporation Rosatom. Quote, I think there will undoubtedly be a discussion with Musk about Mars flights in the near future, Dmitriev said in a business forum in Moscow, going on to praise Musk's efforts to push the boundaries of human achievement. Dmitriev said he was in touch with Roscosmos, Russian business, and the American Chamber of Commerce in Russia. Billionaire entrepreneur Musk was among Trump's biggest donors in the 24 election. It's become one of the president's closest White House advisors. Russia said in 2022 it would start work on its own Mars mission after the European Space Agency suspended a joint project in the wake of Putin's decision to send tens of thousands of troops to Ukraine. Okay, so everything, it appears to me, has a Musk finger in it. Every pie has a Musk finger in it. Now, there's an interesting, and I know Mother Jones sits on a particular end of the spectrum, but Mother Jones reports everything Elon Musk touches is a conflict of interest. I just want to talk about read you this part of the article halfway down that kind of talks to this. So part of what makes Starlink such a minefield of conflict of interest is that it's so difficult to tell where Musk's private interests end and his policy-making ambitions begin. The extra special government employee who joined Trump on a post-election call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky owns a satellite network that the country is counting on to fight Russia. Incidentally, some of the funding for those satellites came from USAID. Musk has also held private phone calls with Russian President Putin, who, according to the Wall Street Journal, discussed blocking Starlink in Taiwan as a favour to China. Taiwan, for its part, so distrusts Musk that it has already banned Starlink and is building its own network. In a post-election talk with the Iranian government official, Musk reportedly discussed the possibility of investing in the country. He has previously promised on X that he would seek an exemption from Treasury Department sanctions to bring Starlink to Tehran. Now he effectively controls the Treasury Department. So you've got to understand what is going on here. Like, Musk is at the center of decision making, and Musk is grifting on those decision makings in terms of making money and gaining even more power as the world becomes ever more dependent on what Musk provides. Honestly, be woke. What I mean by that is be awake to what the hell is going on, because it is happening under our very eyes here. Tesla is another area where Musk's interests are too vast to disentangle from his government work. He has sourced materials from, and parts for his cars, from China, Indonesia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Democratic Republic of Congo, New Caledonia, Australia, Canada, the US, and Japan, and other places. And I would include Russia there. He builds them in China. the US, Canada, the Netherlands, and Germany. The list of places where he's looked into getting lithium or nickel at setting up a plant or at distributing Teslas is vast. And remember, going back to me now, Russia has offered the US rare earth metals as a counter to the minerals deal with Ukraine. Musk's, it continues, business depends on a lot of things happening in certain ways across the world. A SpaceX supplier recently shifted operations from Taiwan to Thailand because of the geopolitical pressure on the former nation. Musk was forced to find a new source of aluminium after sanctions forced him to cut ties with the company controlled by Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. Then there's China, which has banned X and does not permit Starlink to operate. So I've missed a paragraph there. But where Tesla has thrived with the blessing of the authoritarian state, and this is what I referenced earlier. Musk makes cars and sells cars there and has benefited enormously from a rule Tesla pushed for that allows a company to sell emissions credits, just as it does in California. Musk, meanwhile, has parroted the government's talking points on Taiwan, defended its treatment of the Uyghurs. This has been a lucrative relationship for Musk, but also a very fragile one, as Tesla is increasingly caught between American protectionism and the growth of the rival electric vehicle industry in China. That's a fascinating dimension, by the way. Really interesting, because while the GOP is getting aboard Tesla, and it's also putting heavy protectionist tariffs left, right, and center, it is looking like it would want to protect Tesla and might then put tariffs on electric cars, and then that's going to rile China, and you can imagine Tesla being booted out of China. You should see the new BYD factories in China. Like, isn't it the factory for BYD is now bigger than San Francisco? That's a claim I saw the other day. Literally bigger than the footprint of San Francisco. They got electric car factories. Now I need to go and check that out, but I just saw images of I don't know if it's a projected factory. It's not actually built yet, but insane. It's like an entire city just to build these electric cars. So this has been a lucrative relationship for Musk, but a very fragile one with the situation there. You don't have to imagine a scenario in which Musk pressures Trump and Congress to tank legislation that would hurt its interests to the country. He already did that last year. So on and so forth. With his hands-on control of X, Musk has demonstrated a willingness to throttle political speech when censorship benefits friendly leaders. Erdogan of Turkey, Modi of India, Netanyahu of Israel, while using his platform to foment a global right-wing movement. So he talks about freedom of speech, but actually curtails freedom of speech when autocratic leaders ask him to. One would think because there are benefits to him for doing so. He's not a free speech absolutist, not one iota. So anyway, all of that is going on. And then we hear Fiona Hill, who is magnificent on foreign affairs. And here she's talking to Scott Galloway and talks about Musk really being at the center of policy, foreign policy in the US.
There's a whole host of issues that have been decades in the making that need to be addressed. And this is one way of doing them. Basically a convergence between Russia and the United States. It's a convergence of autocratic thinking, to be honest. I mean, we're talking about the very top of our economic pyramid here. And it's really driven in a large part by Trump and his own worldview, and I'll get to that in a second, but also by people like Elon Musk. I mean, Musk has a vested interest, I mentioned this earlier, in basically engaging directly with Russia. I think he's been a big driver of this as well. In parts, it's for Starlink and for the relay stations, the terrestrial relay stations. He needs to have global coverage. Russia is the largest territory in the world, along with China and then, Iran, as well as the United States, Canada, all these giant countries. He needs to have those within his frame for his business to succeed. And look at SpaceX. It developed using the first rocketry and all of the systems developed first in the Soviet Union and Russia. The first inventor of the rocket ship was a Russian scientist, an autodidact, very similar to Musk, frankly, back at the period before the Russian Revolution. So the Soviet Union and Russia have been the pioneers in space. And as I said, there's now discussions going on about how to work for Musk with the Russian Space Agency, the Russian Atomic Agency, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that. And then there's also this great desire that Trump has had since the 1980s of doing business with the Soviet Union and with Russia on a whole host of different fronts from his family perspective. And that's definitely out there. And you mentioned cryptocurrency and all the other kinds of issues that are out there on the table. So that's a major part of this. Of course it is. And it's autocrat to autocrat, oligarch to oligarch, very similar sort of setup here. It's got nothing to do with Americans, particularly given back, as we said before, about the paucity of the trade relationship between Russia and the United States in the past. But it could be very significant in this few set of areas. But the other thing is, and Trump is genuine about this, he is extraordinarily concerned about the...
So it goes on to talk about nuclear war and that Trump is genuinely concerned about that. But the Musk is at the center of everything, right? And so, not only is he, I think, influencing policy and trade and relationships, international relationships between countries, but he is also influencing the dialogue by controlling speech on the platform of Twitter. Yes, I'm using Twitter still quite a bit. I'm trying to get as much as I can from Blue Sky, but I just can't get it all from there. But he controls that, and that feeds into the influence on the global political landscape and the outcomes of elections that may or may not benefit him. So, when it comes to the AFD, he wants the AFD to win. Why? Because he wants the EU to break up. Why? Because regulations on Twitter, SpaceX, and Tesla, etc., etc. The EU is holding him back from markets because it regulates for morality and the environment and safety, etc., in ways that he doesn't like, and that actually other tech billionaires don't like either. So that's why you have other tech billionaires jumping on board with the Trump administration. So they want to undo the EU. They want to start trading, or Trump wants to start trading more openly with Russia again. Tehran gives him that landmass there that he needs for relay stations for its satellites. China's landmass, Greenland, Canada, the US, and of course Russia. He is at the center of everything. So there you go. It would not surprise me one iota if Elon Musk really is actually supposed to be at a top brass meeting in the Pentagon concerning potential war with China. Would not surprise me at all. I am deeply worried that the US is becoming some oligarchically controlled, it's not really a word, but controlled state where you've got this autocrat Trump in charge, but the real puller of the strings is Musk. And you could argue whether Musk is having his strings pulled by China and Russia, Xi Jinping and Putin, but I don't know. You could argue that is to some degree the other way. That's a two-way street. Let me know what you think, but I think this is really significant. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.